Good morning, everybody. This morning, dogs and chocolate. How does that come together? Well, traditional religions stress the personality of their version of God, often casting the illusion that their God mirrors the moods of people. Their God has fits of depression and anger, needs constant praise and attention, then occasionally pulls off some miracle and expects the rest of us to space on everything else. Only this version of God could create, on one hand, dogs, the most lovable and loyal creatures on earth, and chocolate, a universal treat in all its many forms, then make the latter fatal to the former. I had a terrier when I was young, and we had been gifted a 5-pound box of C's chocolate candy. Now, if you ever lived on the West Coast, you know that C's is the premier chocolate candy there. They had their own stores, and it was a real special treat on a Sunday to go there after church and get a 1-pound box. And we had been gifted a 5-pound box, and then had gone off to visit some relatives in the area and came home to find the box open on the floor and the little individual wrappers scattered all about, and our precious dog in terrible distress. He survived, but it was an extremely frightening experience and not something I wish on anybody. However, I'm sure he enjoyed it in the moment and until the consequences set in. Only this version of God revealed through the science of mind does not suffer a hypocrisy of this sort. As we understand spirit, both dogs and chocolate exist, but spirit is not responsible for chocolate. This delectable treat exists only because humans turned cocoa beans into a previously non-existent form through a series of cascading choices. Without human intervention, no self-respecting dog would ever taste a cocoa bean in the wild and think, I gotta eat all this stuff I can find. The version of spirit or God that could allow dogs to encounter an unrestricted supply of chocolate without human intervention can only exist where the concept of duality is believed. Holmes writes in The Science of Mind that belief in duality has made man sick, and the understanding of unity will heal him. You see, duality is believing that there is a power of good and a power of evil, locked in an eternal struggle for rule over the universe. Science of mind has peeled back the falseness of that belief with just a few simple questions. Your Honor, if it please the court, before questioning this witness, I would like to enter into the record the following stipulations agreed to by opposing counsel. Number one, God is all powerful. Number two, God can do anything. Number three, God is self-aware. Number four, God can intervene on our behalf, especially in determining who wins football games. And number five, humans are made in God's image. Now, you say the God you teach is all powerful. So how is it there can be another power? This evil power that is the cause of so much mischief. Science of mind has revealed the truth that God is indeed all powerful, is indeed the one power, infinite, being without beginning or end, thus occupying all space and time meaning this other power, evil, is where exactly? Science of mind puts evil solely in the minds, small m, of humans. A consequence of free choice, the one power gifted to humans upon creation, with God signing over all rights from the beginning of time through perpetuity to exercise discretion when creating from our beliefs. Any evil created is a product of our belief, manifested without judgment by a loving God. You say the God you teach can do anything, yet it seems helpless in the face of this other evil power. How is it this all-powerful can do anything God is so vulnerable? Science of mind has revealed we are barking up the wrong tree when we expect God to face down a non-existent threat. In baseball, the pitcher causes the ball to fly in unpredictable ways, fooling the batter into swinging when the ball is not there to be hit. Our free-thinking minds send curveballs and sliders over home plate all the time. It is not God's fault for missing the ball. It was never there to be hit. You tell us the God you teach is self-aware, yet being self-aware, thus fully cognizant of its own greatness, how is it the God you teach demands constant praise and devotion from humans who have been cast out of the Garden of Eden in a fit of rage propagated by failing a loyalty test established for no other reason than to set up that failure? Science of mind shows us a God whose only pitch is a soft lob straight down the middle of the plate. Any failure to hit a home run is due to the batter's lack of skill, not any trickery in the pitch. Science of mind teaches us that a self-aware God or spirit exists in a state of grace, unable to cast judgments on we mere humans, because its love-driven constructive nature does not allow it to act destructively. Science of mind has revealed that this self-aware God can only create from its own involution, relying on our beliefs to direct the form of those creations. Science of mind says God acts on our beliefs. If we truly believe in our ability to win a competition, God does create the sense of discipline required to seek out and practice proper training and conditioning, but God is not betting on the outcome and gives willingly to both sides. Humans are created in God's image. The confusion arises when so many flip the concept, thinking God is created in the image of man. Humans have free choice, all rights thereto having been surrendered by God, as noted earlier. Free choice opens doors for all manner of unfounded thinking, leading to unimaginable consequences. Humans choose to be petty, mean, greedy, moody, or oblivious. These are not attributes of God. We are demonstrating our oneness with God when we reach down to lift others out of the mud, when we give without expecting thanks, when we are grateful for no particular reason. Holmes writes in the book again, there is no record of any great thinker who has taught duality. This teaching of unity, the Lord our God is one God, is the chief cornerstone of the sacred scriptures of the East, as well as our own sacred writings. It is the mainspring of the teachings of modern philosophy, such as unity teachings, the New Thought movement, the occult teachings, the esoteric or inner teachings, and of our own religious science, and even much that is taught under the name of psychology. People who think it through seem to arrive at similar conclusions. The language is reflective of their times and the medium tailored to their audience, but the truths filter through and complement each other. One infinite power. We exist in unity with it. Our experience is reflective of our belief. Now, I have not personally studied all the writings of all the world's religions, but the one commonality among them is that at some point, the words were recorded by human beings. My mainstream Christian upbringing has given me some familiarity with the Christian Bible, whose Old Testament, I am told, closely reflects the Jewish Torah before introducing the updated slant on the message through the teacher Jesus in the New Testament. The human influence becomes evident when inconsistencies pop up. Now, in an article called Top 20 Most Damning Bible Contradictions by Bob Seidensticker in October of 2018, he points out a few, and I'm just selected a couple here for illustration. He has here that Jesus said, "I pray also for those who believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity." This from the book of John. Again, I appeal to you that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought, from the first book of Corinthians. Bob writes that that's a nice thought, but has any prayer failed more spectacularly? Christianity is more than just Roman Catholics and Baptists and Methodists and maybe a few more. There are, by his count, more than 45,000 denominations of Christianity, and still counting. And yet Jesus said, in mind and thought, be perfectly united. Bob writes again that God made an everlasting covenant with Abraham, but then he tore that one up and made another one with Moses. An everlasting covenant, torn up and replaced. The New Testament continues the confusion. He writes, it can't decide whether to look backward and honor existing law or tear it up yet again, because it says both. First, Jesus commits to existing law. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. And then writes, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. That's from the book of Hebrews. These religious tomes have all been influenced by translation upon translation and the politics of their time. And though traditional teachings push loving thy neighbor and forgiveness in one form or another, they also seem to find justification for all manner of atrocity in their pages when their human choices demand it. Holmes writes again in the textbook, man chose to depart from God, good, and man alone must choose to return to it. God lets him alone, for he is a free agent and may do as he wills with himself. When a man decides to return to his father's house, he will find his father is still there. God's creation is perfect, and we must awake to this fact and know that we are now in the kingdom of heaven. We often use the example of light as revelation of spiritual grace. We can block the light, step behind a wall, or be subjected to a passing cloud, but the light is still there. Step into an opening or get above the cloud, and we find the light waiting for us without judgment. No demand for our hall pass or excused absence form. Just take your seat and we'll move on with the lesson. But God does not force us to step out from the wall nor keep us under the cloud. God does let us stay there for as long as we like. If we choose to live in an unlit bomb shelter, God is likely to provide an ample supply of bombs for us to worry about. And we mistakenly wonder why God is so cruel as to make chocolate taste so good to dogs. If we think we can guide our brother aright, Holmes writes, while our feet still walk in darkness, we are mistaken. Can we teach a lesson we have not learned? Can we give that which we do not possess? To suppose so is hypocrisy, a thing to be shunned. Jesus tears the mantle of unreality from the shoulders of hypocrisy, winnowing from the soul of sham and hollowness its last shred of illusion. We cannot see reality until our eyes are open, until the light of eternal truth has struck deeply into our own souls. A national park ranger was asked why it is so difficult to design a bear-proof trash can. Thought a moment, said, there appears to be a considerable overlap between our smartest bears and our dumbest tourists. Likewise, we might recognize a portion of our population willing to do anything toward their selfish ends, overlapping with that portion of our population susceptible to manipulation for a variety of reasons. We must take the stick out of our own eye, as the teacher Jesus said. We cannot see if we are blinding ourselves. Change our perspective and retest our hypothesis. Does it still hold true, or has the result changed? If it has changed, are we willing to adjust our belief? Or do we just keep the stick in our eye and keep believing the same thing, regardless of the new evidence set before us? It seems common these days for people to be telling of difficult transitions through the COVID-19 shutdown. And of course, many have experienced severe disruption of their lives and financial hardships. My focus here is on those who've been able to work or school from home and manage to maintain the thread of their before times life. On reflection, their only real hardship has been that normal experienced an evolutionary shift that they were not prepared for. There are always curveballs and sliders coming our way. Sometimes we just need to let the ball go by or be willing to swing big and miss. Even the best batters in the game are wrong 2/3 of the time. And those are just the ones who get to play it all. In the glossary of the Science of Mind textbook, Holmes defines hell: a discordant state of being, a belief in duality, a sense of separation from God, a belief that our good is always to be and never is. He reminds us hell is not a location. Remember, God created cocoa beans, but humans, not dogs, created chocolate. Thank you.
Full. All right. That's a whole heaps going on there, Reverend Glen. Whole lot. All right, so we're gonna open the floor now to questions, suggestions, any insights? What's your takeaway? Any
I just have one little comment. The takeaway, I mean, dogs and chocolate. So, I said, I'm gonna listen very attentive to this. I'm gonna be very attentive to this message because I gotta see how dogs and chocolate come together. And I understand God made them both. No, God made only one, the dog.
Right. Yeah.
Only and that was the shadow part. You always think, I was thinking of, as you started, all the things that God did and we know that God has done. Chocolate was not one of those things. And I thought that was very interesting. I guess I don't have a point. I enjoyed and appreciated the message and the curveball. Yeah, dogs and chocolate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that is truly artistic. I'm telling you. Oh boy. All right. Let me see if there's any more hands. So the chocolate is a product of the human hands. And so, well, God had nothing to do with that except instill the intelligence in the man who fashioned the chocolate, got it baked, packaged, and delivered.
The knowledge to create chocolate exists in the universe, and we certainly have the ability to sort that out, and we have in many forms, but the product itself is not naturally occurring. So, and as I said, no self-respecting dog would eat a raw cocoa bean and think he needed more of that stuff. Yeah, if you've ever tasted one, they're pretty darn bitter.
Yeah.
Marzia, when I'm putting my talks together, a lot of times I start with just a fragment of a thought, and I'll write it down on my word processor, and then it'll sit there and kind of stew and marinate for days or hours or however long it is before I start to flesh it out. And a lot of times I'll write down several little thoughts and see are they working together? Are they two different thoughts? What's going on? And there's one other thing I just jotted down this last week, partially because of just what's going on in our world. And there's a famous saying by I don't know what you call it, a poem or a verse or whatever, from Martin Niemöller, I think is how he writes his name. And I just paraphrase it here, and I want to share it with you because I just want to share what I've been thinking this last week from the events in the news. And if you just allow me a moment, he's using his as a base. They came for a woman's rights or privacy, but I still have my gun, so I did not care. They came for the right to love without judgment, but I still have my gun, so I did not care. They came to force their misguided beliefs on our schools, but I still have my gun, so I did not care. They came for the right to vote, but I still have my gun, so I did not care. Then one day they came. Their gun was bigger than mine. There's no one left to care.
Wow.
So after a 20-minute talk, if you'd rather ask questions about that 2 minutes.
Well, you know, that is
Yeah.
the sentiment behind the statement of, for evil to persist, good men need do nothing.
Do nothing.
Absolutely.
That was the same thing, because the person, Barnhart, I think his name was, that wrote that, was talking about the way in which the Nazis moved on the society. You know, there was a group, different groups that they moved on, and the quote, good men didn't do anything until they came for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've attributed it to a different name, but it may have gotten muffled in the fog of history.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, Patricia. Thank you for that. That as light workers, you know, Reverend Alma always referred to us as light workers, and for us to sit back, especially metaphysicians, and just delve in theory. Just stay with the theory. Stay with the theory. We're not gonna put our shoulder to the wheel or put any grease on our elbow. We just sit back and theorize. So, yep.
Absolutely. And you know, people wonder, well, what do I need to do personally? And you know, if you're moved to go march someplace or write letters, whatever, you know, that's fantastic. Do whatever spirit pushes you to do. But you know, it can be as simple as in your daily spiritual work, reminding this power that that's not who we are, that there's a different philosophy, that, you know, spirit doesn't take rights away. Spirit doesn't suppress truth. Spirit is all knowledge to all people at all times, and freedom to do what's best for yourself, as long as you're not physically going after others.
After others.
And that can be, you know, not all decisions are easy. Some can be extremely painful, but you don't need somebody else restricting your thoughts while you make that decision for yourself.
Yes.
Yes, Reverend Glen, I was hooked on this dogs and chocolate, and I dare not write a thing while you spoke. So I look forward to going through this recording as it is published, because there are so many parts that as I said, I dare not write a thing. I have to stick with you as you lead us through this this production. So,
You know,
thank you.
when I read a book by Virginia Woolf called To the Lighthouse in college, I hated it with a passion, because it was such a rambling stream of thought that I couldn't predict in my mind what was going to be on the next page. And being a very controlling person at that point in my life, I hated that I couldn't control what was happening in that story. But then when we studied the book, after all of us read it and the professor pointed out what was going on, I've suddenly come to realize that I write in a continuous stream of thought with no particular goal in mind. And that's one of the reasons why I love writing on word processors, because it allows me to edit my stuff and find some form of order. I'm constantly moving sentences and paragraphs around, because, and I would never do that if I were doing it on a typewriter, because I won't type a page twice to save my life. But I do love being able to just throw down my thoughts and then say, okay, let's pretend somebody else is reading it and make sense out of it by organizing the words in a slightly better form. because not everybody's mind is as twisted and bent as mine is, and they would never figure it out. But I remember hating that experience and turning into that experience and recognizing that.
Mhm.
One part
Yeah.
that struck out to me was, or stood out to me was when you said the all-powerful God. You know, how can evil exist if you have an all-powerful God? Is that all-powerful allowing some other entity to take over its position, you know? So
Mhm.
that's one
Yeah.
point. I have others to go through.
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to squeeze oil and water into the same space. They'll exist, they'll coexist in the container, but not in the same space.
Okay.
Mhm.
And
Thank
we
you.
define God as being only one space. So kind of a contradiction there.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and also following on to that idea is that you mentioned that no one taught duality, or not the great teachers. So the question is, so how come so much duality is exists in our teachings, or are the teachings?
Mhm.
And like dogs and chocolate, you know, if the Almighty did not make these opposites, as you would say, but we manufacture them out of our own free will.
And they exist in
Yeah.
our minds,
Yeah.
and as they exist in our mind, they are as real as our belief, because
Yes,
as long as we believe it, you
it
know,
is perpetrated. Yes.
if you
Mhm.
listen to people that say, like you get 10 witnesses to an event, you're going to get 10 versions of that event. They all remember it differently based on
Yeah.
their own experience.
Mhm.
That is one of the reasons why, and this is a little off from what you're saying, but the importance of communication. You don't know what's in people's minds and how they perceive their lives. And so unless they express out what they are perceiving, then we oftentimes go on our own assumptions.
Mhm.
And our own assumptions never are correct, because we're not in their minds. I was told, the Spirit said to me real out loud, no matter what you think it is, that ain't it. Yeah. So
Sometimes I'll be watching a television show where there's some sort of a therapy session going on as part of the story, and they're giving us, a little insight to what's going on, and the therapist will ask a question about something, and I'm thinking, wow, that's a really enlightened way to approach that. I would have slapped the guy, but then they're going, yeah, clarify what they just said, tell them what you understood and ask them, is that what they meant? That's such a simple thing to do. And we don't do it, do we? We jump to our own conclusion and we act on our own beliefs.
Right. Mhm. Yep. Certainly right.
and believe, and it is, as they say, we believe what we believe as truth. In the book, The Four Agreements, remember, it talks about our book of law. It's those ideas
So
that we have embraced, we uphold. Some of them were given to us by our immediate community, our family, our neighborhood, schools, and then some of those we've manufactured on our own, just based on the projections. What's on TV and what's what's on the radio.
right.
And for those, so many of us have, all of us have at some degree or another in our lives, and some more than others, been taught that we are not worth anything.
Oh yeah.
And when we believe that, and believe it with our hearts, all sorts of mischief stems from that.
Yes.
And that's a real tough one. That's a real grab them by the shirt collar moment and say, just stop. Let me share some ideas with you.
Yeah.
And see if you can open your eyes a little bit. See if we can get that log out of your eyes so that you can understand a new truth.
Right.
replace the one that you've so heavily invested in.
Wow. Pause long enough to just listen.
But to the point that Patricia made about, you know, you don't know what's in someone's mind until they express it. You know, I just thought of situations where you ask someone a question and they'll return the question, you know, by saying, you know what I'm thinking. No, I do not. You have to express it.
Exactly.
What I know is what I'm thinking, not what you are thinking, you know.
Oh
And, you know,
boy.
a lot of times I like to, well, I don't like to necessarily, but I do as a matter of my day. I'll read the Twitter feeds from people who have political opinions that don't necessarily agree with me. And sometimes it's a painful experience because I'll read them and I'll say, this, oh, then once in a while I'll say, okay, there's an idea. I understand where you're coming from and I'm examining it from your perspective, but I still disagree with you, you know? And it's like, no, I've seen your argument and it doesn't wash. And I've also seen the arguments from people that I generally do agree with, and I'll say, now you're just nitpicking, and why do you want to pick that fight? That is not the hill to die on, you know? So
Yeah.
it's good to get the exposure from both, but you know what? When you're right, you're right. When you're wrong, and sometimes you just have to dig in and swing.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if to that point, right is right. Well, when you're right. To the point of belief, when we have a belief that we're upholding, we always want it to be right. We always want to be
Yes.
right.
Of course.
Yes.
And, you know, I am working with that idea for myself, because when I feel that I am, quote, right, I'm even working to use a different term on that. When I feel that I am correct,
Mhm.
and I must be willing to express the idea that I feel is correct. I must also be willing to examine it from another perspective, if the person is willing to express. And that's the challenge. Everyone's not willing to say what's on their mind. Many people will just allow what is being projected or what is being said to be the word and not share their insight. And being correct, and you know, we wanting to be correct, everyone wants to be correct, and no one wants to own the fact that they want to be correct, but that's why we get into arguments, because we want to be correct and you want to convince the others to see it your way. It's just the on and on, around and around circle on that particular idea. But the notion of the need to express, you know, be open and be willing to share what is on your mind, that is a part of what I think will help us to embrace our unit, the unity love, the unity and the love that is being projected to us, or flowed to us, not projected,
Right.
being flowed to us.
Flowed.
Yeah.
Well, one of the phrases I always recall and still love from my traditional Christian upbringing is when the argument's going around and around, as you say, and somebody comes up with, well, what would Jesus do?
Right.
And basically, you know, it's the same as, well, what is the spiritual truth here? Because I'll accept Jesus as being spiritual truth. They pretty much had it down. And so I like that phrase. And when you go back and you go, all right, I guess maybe I really shouldn't slap that guy. Maybe I should rephrase the question and get a better understanding of what they're thinking. Yeah, my ego may not be right in that moment, but the reality is Spirit doesn't judge us so much as ask us to clarify our thinking. And if we go back to what would Jesus do, we generally find out, you know what? I don't think he would suppress votes. I think he'd want to know what everybody's thinking so that we get a general feel for what the community needs.
And see, I would have a little bit of issue right now because I see Jesus as a human like me, the Christ. What would the Christ do? I would, if someone said, what would the Christ do? Then I am much more, and that's me now at this time, much more open to examining the spiritual aspect of the situation. But now when I hear people say, what would Jesus do? I think about what would Ashley do, or what would Glenn do, or what
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
Charles do.
Yeah.
Because
Okay,
I understand.
and there's a perfect example, because when I refer to Jesus that way, I'm going back to my 8-year-old self in Methodist school, and
Yeah.
the Jesus and Christ are one and the same in my mind. So
Right.
we're on the same page, and I appreciate your
Yes.
different understanding
Yes.
of the terminology. But yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah, we get
All
that.
right. Great. Oh, great discussion this morning.